Welcome back to Chess Dog. Today we have a game between GM Wesley So and one of India's best, Grandmaster Gukesh. Now they are in the Tata Steel Masters Tournament 2023, which is really beginning to heat up. Wesley So is near the top, Magnus Carlsen is beginning to make his comeback, and Norbek Abdusadarov is currently in first place. There's no telling how this thing is going to end up. This game, again, was between Wesley So and Grandmaster Gukesh. Grandmaster Gukesh has black. Wesley So has white. Classical time control. Let's jump right in. Gukesh begins with e4. Wesley So responds with e5. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and knight to f6. Wesley So plays the Berlin defense to the Ruy Lopez. Now, the old endgame that was very commonplace back in the day that Kramnik popularized was this position, but black's been doing real well there, and recently white's pretty much always been playing d3 at the top level to play a more complex middle game, similar to an Italian game, actually. Bishop to c5, and you can see the similarities if you're familiar with the Italian game. After c3, white is threatening to later expand in the center with d4, castles, and the main move here is d6. But Wesley So decides to play d5. He wants to open up the position very fast, so he plays the most direct move on the board, e d5, and then queen d5. Usually you say you don't want you to put your queen in the middle of the board, but the knight at b1 cannot jump to c3 to gain a tempo against the queen because it's blocked. The pawn at c3 takes away that square for the knight, so the queen is well placed on d5. Bishop c4 hits the queen retreats. b4 gaining space. Here black does not want to play the bishop to b6. Now the bishop could come to g5 and pin that knight, and there would be no way to relieve the pin. So instead he plays the bishop to d6, defends the e5 pawn. White could later expand, of course, with b5, hitting the knight. Knight b to d2, h6 to keep a piece out of g5, rook to e1, putting pressure on this e5 pawn, rook to e8 to defend it, and a4. Grandmaster Gukesh continues his queenside expansion. a6 to slow that down, so he can't play b5 and retake with the pawn because there's this pin along the a file. Queen to c2, knight to e4 would also have been a decent move. And in fact, Wesley So played this himself when he had this position as white against Anand. So he's played this at the top level from the white and black side. But Grandmaster Gukesh plays queen to c2, bishop to e6, challenging the bishop on c4. And this position had been reached 3 times before, and in all 3 games, white took on e6. But Grandmaster Gukesh plays a novelty. He plays the bishop to b2. Now, this could open up and create a lot of problems for Wesley So's king. The one downside to it, though, it does remove some control over the f4 square, and perhaps at some point Wesley So might want to take that knight and put it on that square. Queen goes to d7, rook to e2, bishop to f5, putting some pressure on the queen and also some pressure on the d3 pawn. Rook a to e1, continuing to pile up on e5, and now rook to e7. Black wants to defend e5, and we can see that this e5 pawn and square has become the focal point of the position. White's attacking, black defending. Now, the best move here, at least according to computers, is knight to e4. This is a reasonable idea. White has a decent game, but Grandmaster Gukesh really makes a dangerous move here. He plays the move h3, inviting the sacrifice of the bishop on h3. And I'm sure he calculated this and felt like he could defend it and that it would be a mistake for Grandmaster Wesley So to take that pawn. And Grandmaster So does not do it. He actually doubles his rooks. What happens if he does take bishop h3? Well, it turns out this probably is the best move in the position, and black gets a good game. After gh3, queen h3, black has 2 pawns for the piece. After rook e4, knight to g4, black's threat is to play the king to h8 and then play f5. He has to play that first because there's a pin on that f7 pawn. So king h8, f5, and that would be such a vicious attack. White would be forced to give up the rook for the knight. Black would have a very good position. Wesley So should have grabbed the h3 pawn, it looks like. Knight to e4 was played here by white. And now knight to h5. We talked about how this bishop moved to b2 and f4 is now weakened. Now Wesley So aims to plant that knight on the f4 square. The bishop goes back to c1 to control that square. And now king to h8. getting out of this pin so he can advance the pawn at f7. So he wants to slide the bishop back, then advance the pawn to f5 to continue his attack. Knight to h4 hits the bishop. Here, after bishop h7, g4, white would start to get an initiative. So he instead moves the bishop back to e6. The queen goes to d1, threatening discoveries. This knight is undefended on h5, so when the rook moves, the queen would be attacking it. And Wesley So does the exact same thing. He plays the queen to d8. He attacks, indirectly, white's knight at h4, which is also undefended. Now here, Gukesh plays the move b5, gaining space on the queen's side and hitting the knight at c6. The computer's recommendation here is g3. Looks like it's just giving away a pawn, but actually after bishop takes h3, now rook to a2, the queen is attacking this knight, and there's no easy way to defend the knight. Anywhere it moves, it just gets itself into trouble. If black tries to defend it, it gets into trouble. So this actually would have been a very strong idea, but it is a computer idea. Even a strong grandmaster would have a hard time finding it. b5 was played, knight to a5, bishop e6, rook takes e6, and now knight to f5. By the way, if you're getting value from this video, be sure to click the subscribe button for future videos. The bishop retreats to f8 to keep the king defended. The queen moves to c2. Now, here's my question. White's pieces look nice. I mean, he's got the two rooks on the half-open e-file. The knights are on nice squares. But what's he attacking? It's hard to see a continuation. It looks like Wesley So has all of his vulnerable points well defended. Pawn takes on b5, now b6 to defend the knight. And here, Grandmaster Gukesh makes a mistake. He makes a blunder. He plays the move d4. Actually, the best move, according to computers, is rook to d1, which is essentially another way of doing nothing. It's very hard to do nothing, even for strong players. There are a few players like Kramnik and a couple of others that are really great at making sort of those nothing moves, but it's very hard to do. And Grandmaster Gukesh was not able to do that. So instead, he plays the move d4, but that allows this strong response from Wesley So. Knight to f4, hitting the rook. And by the way, if bishop takes f4, ef4, c4, white would have a fairly equal position here. But after rook to d2, queen to d5. Very strong response from black. The queen is attacking the b5 pawn. Black is also threatening pawn takes d4 and then attacking this knight on e4, which is insufficiently defended. And white can't play c4 here because then knight just takes c4. So white plays knight to e3, hitting the queen, which is really his only choice. It is the best move, but now queen takes b5, and he loses a pawn. White plays d5, gaining space. The rook goes to g6, and now Wesley So is threatening knight takes h3 check. The pawn cannot take the knight because the g2 pawn is pinned. So to prevent that, Grandmaster Gukesh plays knight to g3 to block that pin, but now bishop to c5. And Wesley So's pieces are beginning to get extremely active. Next could be a move like knight to c4, and almost every piece would be very well posted. Queen to e4 was played, but now bishop takes knight, a very strong move, because if the queen takes, then knight to c4 forks the queen and the rook, and black would win more material. He's already won a pawn. He'd win an exchange to go on top of that. So pawn takes is played instead, but now knight takes c4 anyway. Knight to h3 check is a strong move here because the knight on g3, excuse me, is hanging to black's rook. But Wesley So goes ahead and plays knight to c4 first, of course attacking the rook. If ef4, then just rook g3. Great position for black. So when the rook moves to f2, now knight to d6. This attacks white's queen and also defends black's queen on b5. And in this position, Grandmaster Gukesh resigned. Now let's look and see why. If white plays queen to c2, then knight to d3. The queen defends the knight, and there's a fork of the two rooks. So you'd have a pawn and an exchange. That's the equivalent of a whole minor piece. Too much material. What if instead of that, White plays queen to b4, offering the exchange of queens. Well, that doesn't change anything. Knight to d3 still works, and if queen takes queen, you just take that with the knight, and the fork remains. Not only that, this knight on g3 is still hanging to the rook on g6. Now Wesley So is very much back in the mix to win Tata Steel 2023. Now, even after going over this great game from Wesley So, there is still some great chess you're missing out on. To fix that problem, believe it or not, the key game you're going to want to watch is this game right here, so be sure to tune into that for some mind-blowing chess. See you again soon. Bye.